Hello and welcome back to the next episode of Hearts for Jesus Weekly Podcast. My name's Garrett. I'm a pastoral intern here at Vineyard Church Albuquerque. I'm here with Pastor Perry. And something that's been coming up this week over and over, and it must be important, is getting our priorities in order. And that this is the time to get our priorities in order, not when the shutdown gets lifted, not when we get thrown back into the pace of things, but right now.
That's right.
And that seems so important. So, Pastor, why do you think that that's been so relevant, so important? What do you think God is saying to us with that?
Well, in the past year, at the National Vineyard Conference where we went to last July, one of the words was, it's time to get ready. And it wasn't clear what for. And then last fall, we heard from several different pastors or church leaders, God is saying, get ready. And then here, now we're all kind of confined, we're constricted, and it's time while we're kind of shut in to take to heart the idea of getting ready. And what we're getting ready for is twofold. One is the new normal, because we're not going back to the way it was. And two is, I believe there'll be a revival, a renewal, a reformation when we get loose and the gospel gets loose again. So we have to reprioritize in order to be ready for the next thing on God's calendar, whatever that is.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because that word that you got, get ready, that's very much an action. That's an action to take.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy. Now, I can definitely speak for myself here. It's easy for me to get stuck in kind of a day-to-day routine. And it just feels like I'm stuck in the pace. I'm stuck in overwhelm. And maybe there's something I want to stop doing. Maybe there's something like a new habit that I want to start doing.
Right.
But days just roll into days and weeks into weeks and months into months. And I never really stop to take that action of get ready. Because I think to get ready, I think first you kind of got to stop.
Right.
And that's really hard to do in the normal course of things. So it's an amazing opportunity that we have right now to be paused.
That's true.
To be able to step back.
Yep.
And to take that pause and then do the action of getting ready. And the first action seems to be prioritize. Get our priorities in order before we get hurled back into this fast pace of day-to-day society.
That's right. There's a famous little booklet called The Tyranny of the Urgent. And in this little booklet, the picture is used of you're just floating down a river in a canoe. You're going with the flow. And so you're doing what you have to do just to maintain the status quo. And many times the status quo, the urgent things that yell at us, they keep us from focusing on what's really important rather than what's just urgent. So we have to pull the canoe over, get out, and kind of check our map and see where it is we actually want to go, and then get back in the canoe and go upstream or downstream depending on where it is we want to go. So it means stop going with the flow, stop listening to just the urgent, and use this opportunity, like you said, Garrett, to say, where is my life headed? What is this COVID all about? And what am I going to do to be ready for whatever's next?
Yeah, that's so amazing. I had an opportunity when I was a couple of years into business to actually stop and take stock of my life. Kind of like you're saying, to get out of the flow of where I was going. I realized that where I was going, I didn't really like where that was leading. So I wanted to make some kind of a shift.
Right.
And that required me, as hard as it was, to pause, to not just jump into the next day and the next day and the next day, but to actually pause and stop and let some things, kind of be out of my control.
Right.
And to take that pause and to take stock of where I was. And the process that I used to do that was in a book called The Next Level Entrepreneur.
Right.
And that was such an amazing process. It's a step-by-step guide of connecting to your heart, connecting to your passions, figuring out what's important to you,
Mm-hmm.
and going forward with a strategic plan of putting your time and effort and energy into things that are important to you and important to God. And that was probably, besides giving my life to Jesus, that was probably the one of the better decisions I made in my life, was to recognize in this direction, I don't quite like where this is going. This is a lot of overwhelm. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not being a very good husband in this time. I barely see my wife anymore. And just kind of recognizing that stuff and saying, okay, I got to stop and pause and take stock. But I do recommend that process in the Next Level Entrepreneur. That was something that was really, really helpful for me to do. Like you're saying, to pause, get out of the flow, take stock, proactively decide where you want to go, and not just let life take you wherever it is you'll go. We were Jessica and I actually got to honeymoon in Maui.
Ooh.
And that was an absolutely amazing experience. That's probably our favorite place is out there now. We both love adventure and the water and coral and mountains and snorkeling, surfing, all that kind of stuff. We love it. But we got onto a sailboat, and God really came, and he was very present there for both of us and spoke to me on that sailboat. It was really, really cool. And he said, Garrett, this sailor, he's skilled. No matter what the wind does, no matter what the ocean does, he's going to get you to the destination that you want to go.
Right.
No matter what else happens.
Right.
And you can be like that in your life too. No matter how the winds of the world, the trials, the tribulations, whatever, no matter how the winds of the world blow or whatever storms churn up in the water, you don't have to go that way. You don't have to be pushed by the winds of the world, the waves, the trials, the problems of the world. You don't have to be pushed. If you don't want to go that way, then set your sail. Learn how to set your sail. Learn how to proactively decide the direction of your life. And he used that sailboat and that experience to to teach me. It was a really amazing teaching moment of hearing God, and it was just so cool.
Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount, one of the verses that we know the best is, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. Yeah. So one of the things we have to do in terms of priorities is to say, is my life headed towards God's kingdom and God's righteousness? Because he has promised, if I set my sail in that direction, everything else that I need is going to show up and come my way. But if I just focus on my daily needs, I may, from your point of view, I may end up in the wrong port. Yeah. I may end up sailing and landing someplace I don't want to be. And so prioritizing means putting the kingdom and God's righteousness first, and then watching God keep his promise to take care of all the rest of our needs.
Yeah, and what's been so amazing for me is that in pausing, in putting God first, and that's something that I'm still working on doing. It's something that is, I have to keep it very at the front of my mind.
Sure.
And I have to be reminded that, and it's almost like every decision of every day, I just need to stop and remind myself, seek ye first the kingdom, and the rest will be added to. So I'm like, okay, how do I do that in this decision? And it's one thing at a time. Right. It's one decision at a time, and it's one day at a time. But what I've noticed is that even just getting a couple decisions right and seeking first the kingdom of God with just a couple decisions, that little pivot, that over time, that leads to somewhere totally different than where I was going and where I didn't want to go.
That's true.
I heard it explained pretty well in airplane analogy. So if a plane takes off from California and it's 1 degree off, and 1 degree isn't a whole lot at all. If it's 1 degree off, if it's trying to get to New York, it's going to end up 2 states over by the time it gets there. So 1 degree off puts you in a place that you don't want to be.
That's true.
But vice versa, a 1 degree pivot in the right direction, traveled over time, that puts you in a much better place than you were going.
That's
before.
true.
So it doesn't have to be huge, overwhelming, massive
Right.
shifts. Just even just if we make a 1 degree shift, a 1 degree shift at a time
Right.
puts you in a totally different place than you were going before.
That's right.
So,
Mildred helps me with this. As I mentioned yesterday in my Sunday message, Mildred is what I call the GPS voice in my car.
yeah.
And when I get one street off, Mildred says, recalculating. And so I have to make a U-turn or make a square block and then go back. And tiny recalibrations keep us from huge mistakes.
Yeah.
And for me, a person with spiritual ADD, this means every day I've got to sit down and again say, all right, where am I headed? Do I need to make a small correction in my course? Do I need to recalibrate in order to stay on course to where I'm supposed to go?
Yeah. And someone like me too, ADD, I have something called an active distraction defense. So that's my ADD.
Okay.
So the active distraction defense, well, part of it is a daily habit of spending time with God and getting in the Word, so that when things come up throughout the day, I'm fresh in the Word and I'm able to, like we're talking about, seek first the kingdom, to prioritize that first.
Yeah.
And that's part of my ADD system. That's my
good.
active distraction defense.
That's excellent.
So I add as much as I can to my active distraction defense because I want to stay on the right track.
That's good. You know, one of the things that's happened in our culture is more and more people are going to the emergency room because they're walking and they're looking at their phone and they walk into poles or walls or cars. And what's required is that you lift your head and look a little further down the road.
Yeah.
My wife was a social worker in Texas, and her job was to help people who didn't have enough resources to last for a month. They would get a check from the government on the 1st of the month, and by the 15th of the month, they were out of money, no groceries, no money for anything of essentials. And so she would connect them with resources to get them from the 15th of the month to the end of the month when the next check would come. And what she found over a period of time is the same people had the same problem every month. They weren't able to lift their heads, look 30 days into the future, and plan their finances accordingly. And I think that's a good picture of where a lot of us in America are. We are so focused on the right here and the right now, and we're not watching where we're going. We're not lifting our eyes to see what's down the road. We're not recalibrating to make sure we're seeking first God's kingdom. And as a result, we not only get 1 degree off and then 2 and then 3, we run into things and we find out, wait a minute. And so part of what we've got to do with priorities is stop, lift our heads, and reorient ourselves to where we're going.
Yeah. No, that's so good. One of the things that was taught to me was one of the best skills you can learn is the ability to forego instant gratification for a larger future reward.
That's true.
And that's, I think, what we're talking about here, seeking first the kingdom. The kingdom comes later. Like the kingdom is coming for us, but putting the kingdom first, well, that might mean that foregoing some kind of an instant or right now gratification for the larger future reward. And that's something that is really hard to do.
Yeah.
To use a survival example, right? Well, you could eat right now, or you could probably eat more later. Well, which one are you gonna do? Well, it's it's tough. But yeah, it's a good skill to practice. Forego the instant gratification for the larger future reward.
There's a famous social experiment where they put a 4-year-old, a boy or a girl, at a table. They put a marshmallow in front of him.
Yeah.
And they leave and they say, you can eat the marshmallow now, but if you wait till I come back, I'll give you 5 marshmallows.
Yeah.
And then they leave with no intention of coming back, simply viewing the child, looking at that marshmallow and discovering how long will a child wait before they decide, I want that marshmallow now. And that's a lot of us. I want it now.
Well, yeah, that's a really good picture of our lives as a Christian,
Yeah.
as a follower of Jesus. Jesus said he's coming back for us, but didn't
Right.
tell us when. That's
Right.
something that God doesn't tell us, is when
Right.
that'll be. So it's like, here's this amazing, awesome reward, but you can't have it yet.
Right.
I'm coming back. You don't know when I'm coming back, though.
Right.
So did any of the kids not eat the marshmallow?
It was from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. And most of them would eat the marshmallow within the first minute. And only a very few would wait for 4 or 5 minutes. So,
Yeah.
and some of that's 4-year-old behavior.
Yeah.
But how many of us are still living like that 4-year-old looking at that marshmallow?
Yeah. No, I'm one of those 4-year-olds looking at the marshmallow, trying to forego the instant gratification
Right.
for the larger future reward, trying to put the kingdom first in as many decisions as I can every day to make small pivots and move in the direction that I want to go.
And most of us, we tend to operate with a little bit of a nagging fear.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that if I don't snatch what's near, it won't stay. Or I'm afraid that what's coming might be worse than what is. And so a lot of our priorities are foregone because we're concerned, we're worried, or even afraid that if we don't get it now or if we don't do this direction, God won't keep his promise. He won't come through, and life won't be what he's promised. And so it's a hard thing to face the emotions of, well, I'm afraid of what might happen.
Yeah. That was something that I think was holding me back from what God had for me quite a bit, is just the fear of what I didn't know. You know, the fear of feeling out of control. And like I talked about on Sunday, you know, things have gone very, very well. And it's a huge blessing. It's an absolute miracle what's happened for Jessica and I and the business and this new merging of businesses and partnership. But I think something that was keeping me back from that was that I was trying to tell God what I wanted to happen and hope that he would do that.
Right.
And finally, you know, I remembered that I said, oh yeah, I told God that this is his company a long time ago, and that he's in charge, and that he can tell me what to do, and I'm the manager.
Right.
And so I was like, oh yeah, that's the relationship here. So let's get back to that.
Right.
So what do I do with this? What would you have me do? And
you know, when you settle a big decision, a lot of little decisions just fall in place.
yeah,
And one of the things I remember mentioning about priorities is where Jesus said, you can't serve two masters.
Yeah.
You're going to love the one and hate the other, or you're going to be devoted to one and ignore the other. And when a person makes a decision, I'm going to follow Jesus, he's my master, that makes a lot of other decisions already done.
Mm.
And then we just have to remind ourselves day by day, wait a minute, he's the boss, I'm the servant, he's the owner, I'm the manager, just like you had to do.
Yeah.
But we have to do that constantly and regularly, because life has a way of slapping us in the face and saying, you better do this right now or you're going to go under.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, he's the master, I'm going to serve him.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of this. I think that's a big part of getting our priorities now. And that's what we've been hearing. That's what we've been feeling this week, is right now is the time to get the priorities straight. It's not when the shutdown gets lifted. It's not then, it's right now.
Right.
Because if we don't, we're going to go back into the same fast pace and overwhelm and chaos that we were in before.
Right.
And we don't want to do that. We want to go back in with clear priorities and the satisfaction in knowing that our limited time and energy and attention are going to things that truly matter to us and truly matter to God. My grandmother, she used to garden rose bushes.
Okay.
And she didn't want several little blooms on her rose bushes. She wanted a few big
Big
blooms
ones. Okay.
on her rose bushes. So she was out there meticulously trimming and pruning the bush.
Hmm.
And I was out there with her one day, and she said, "See that weed over there that's growing through the concrete? Right? We don't have to go do anything to that to make that grow. You can put concrete down over weeds, and it'll find a way to come up through it."
That's true.
And I'm I'm thanking my grandma for that now, because now I'm understanding that my life was so in the weeds
Hmm.
that any little thing that popped up,
Right.
I gave my energy and attention to it.
Right.
Now, was it what I wanted to give my energy and attention to? Not hardly ever. No.
Right.
Mita Ray Brown has a quote. She says, "A life of reaction
Right.
is a life of slavery, both spiritually and intellectually. One must fight for a life of creativity versus reacting." And it's so easy to get stuck in reaction.
It is.
Right? It's easy to, you go into your day, maybe you have a plan and you know what you want to do, but then an email, a phone call, this thing, this happens, and all of a sudden you're being pulled in 1,000 different directions, and you're exhausted at the end of the day. And you look back on it when someone asks you how your day was, and you say, "Oh, it was really busy." They say, "Well, what did you accomplish toward those goals, that lifestyle?"
Right.
According to, "Well, I didn't do anything." Well, and then you feel horrible. Right. So she taught me that you have to trim the rose bush.
Right.
So she gave me clippers, and it was a difficult thing to do. It's difficult to cut a bud off of the rose bush, because it's like, "Yeah, but this has potential to bloom into a rose. You want me to cut this off?"
Right.
She said, "Yeah, you got to cut it off. We're only going to leave a few, because like humans, the rose bush will try to produce more buds than it can sustain."
Right.
And then so like us, like humans, we end up with this to-do list that no one thing on there can get enough time or energy or resource from us to result in anything.
Right.
So now we have all this potential that we're trying to manage, and we don't have it in the tank to give, because like a rose bush is limited on resources. So are we every day. So we have to, I think part of prioritizing is saying no to something. I think that what God wants us to do before we get launched back into the fast pace of society and day-to-day life is He wants us to say no to something.
That's right.
He wants us to get something off the schedule, something that's unproductive. Maybe it's a bad habit. Maybe it's even saying no to or limiting bad influences on us. But it's saying no to something. Exactly. It's cutting some kind of bud off the bush. That's so that the other things that are truly important to you and truly important to God can get enough of your time and energy and resources to blossom into something.
That's right. One of my favorite teachers, Howard Hendricks, I remember him saying this: "Paul wrote that this one thing I do." And most of us have these 40 things we dabble in.
Yeah.
And we do, like you said, Garrett, we need to prune.
Yes.
And Jesus said that in John 15. He says, "Every branch that bears fruit, I prune it." Why? So that it will bear more fruit. Right. We're often like the passengers on the plane where midway through the flight, the pilot came over the intercom and said, "I'm sorry, folks, we've lost our navigation and we're not really sure where we are. But the good news is we're traveling very fast, and so we're making record time." And that's a lot of us. We're getting a lot of little things accomplished, but we're not headed in the right direction.
Yeah. So I think what's happening here in the prioritization is getting back in the right direction.
Yeah.
And getting back on track into our walk with God.
Right.
We may have gotten off track in the crazy pace of society. I mean, that's part of the title of this podcast. It's navigating this crazy world as followers of Jesus. And I think that what's so important now, what's so heavy on our hearts that we're hearing from God right now, is this reprioritization right now before you get back into the pace.
That's right.
So,
well, some of us are stalled on our journey. Some of us are detoured, and we've got to recalibrate. Some of us are wounded and we just need some R&R. But
Yeah.
all of us who bear the image of God, and especially those who've chosen to follow Jesus, we can hear from our Master, get on track, and seek His kingdom first, and see our lives, when this emergency is over, actually bear great fruit and participate in what could be the greatest revival our planet has ever known.
That's
And I don't
right.
want to miss that.
Right. Yeah. I don't either. Well, thanks for coming in, for listening. We're going to pray now about this. We're going to pray that we hear more deeply, more clearly about what that means for you personally to reprioritize, to get that clear now before the shutdowns lift. And so, Pastor, would you like to lead us in that prayer?
Sure. Lord, I thank you that your sheep hear your voice, that you've told us to get ready. And so in this time of crisis, help us to prioritize, to reprioritize, to put you first, to really think through as we pause, what would it look like for me to follow Jesus with all my heart?
Yeah.
So guide our friends, Lord. Show us the way we should go so that we can have maximum impact for your kingdom and for your sake. I pray this for us in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen.
Amen.